Hey, everybody, welcome back to episode 2 of the artist formerly known as Micadelic show, as indicated by my Instagram handle, Tafka Micadelic. This is the way we're doing things. We're doing it. We're just doing it. We're not procrastinating anymore, trying to figure out the perfect name for the show. But if you have ideas, leave them in the comments. I still have a couple that I feel it's so funny because as you'll hear in this podcast, in this podcast, you'll hear actually that's my real voice. I've been putting this is an accent. I've been putting it on. I've been doing an impression of a stocky New York Italian American guy for far too long. I need to come forward and just start talking like this. This is how I really talk. And the podcast is going to be named Masks because we all wear masks, and I've been wearing one. I really actually find that a fun and enjoyable way to talk. Kind of wish I had a distinct accent. Let me know in the comments if you wish you too had a distinct accent. Another fun one to do is Sam Elliott. He's kind of got that burly type of, you got to get real close to the microphone. So from now on, we're going to do the podcast like this. This here podcast is going to be called The Sam Elliott Show. What if I just named the podcast The Sam Elliott Show? Let me know if you think Sam Elliott would be sending me a lawsuit. But anyway, what I was going to say is it's funny in this episode with the wonderful Mark Pontius. Uh, we talk about that a little bit. And towards the end, I say, yeah, I'm sure that I'm going to come up with a name. It'll probably emerge by the time this podcast gets out. But I'm happy the way that I've done things. I cast myself into it. And I think this is apropos for the kind of discussion that Mark and I are having here on this podcast, which revolves all around the creative process and leaving things when they no longer serve you and learning how to create what is true and authentic and original to you. And I think that for the longest time, I had been struggling to try and find that thing, that authenticity in a title, in a name, trying to set the container before the content. And so I'm just doing it like this. We're doing the content and the container will come. I purposefully put myself in a position where I would procrastinate no longer because it has been 2 years since I've really put anything out. And what I did was I just booked a string of guests. So episode 1 was with Michael Phillip, Third Eye Drops podcast. Love him, love that show. This one is with Mark Pontius, co-host of The Projector and The Flail, and goes by the name Suitin' Up with a 5 on Instagram, and that is his music, where you could find that on Spotify as well. And he's also a consultant for creatives. And as you'll hear in this show, we get into that whole process. He's really got a lot to offer. Mark is somebody who is just, you just feel his heart when you're with him. He's got a big heart. He's a great person. He's an amazing human being, really quality individual. Yeah, we hit it off immediately. I think we were just like hanging out on the deck one night and like talking. He starts like talking about something. I'm like, oh yeah, I know what. Okay, and like slowly kind of like unfolding into the realm of like heady bro discourse of like all this like esoteric, like cool, weird, far out stuff that him and I are both obsessed with. And I forgot to mention, Mark is the former co-founder and drummer of the band Foster the People. And I kind of forgot to mention that because I don't really know him uh, when he was a part of that band, or I don't know him in that way. To me, Mark is so much more than what he used to do. And so uh, that's a little bit of contextual information, I suppose, as to who he is and his body of work and yeah, his all the things that he's doing now. I already mentioned. So that's kind of where I know him from, and I just wanted to mention that too because that is the unique sort of insight that he holds as a creative person and navigating the challenges of skyrocketing to fame and then coming back down to earth and like starting to get really into his own spiritual development and growth and producing things that are really authentic to him and making things that are really authentic to him. So I just wanted to mention that I really enjoyed this conversation, and I hope you do too. And if you do, please do the things that you do when you like stuff. Tell people about it. Leave comments. Let me know your thoughts, your opinions, your ideas, your feelings, and share it with people. And don't forget to subscribe. Click the bell notification to get notified when new videos are out. I'll be releasing about 2 to 3 videos a week. All the links to go and check out Mark for his creative consulting, for his music on Spotify, for anything else, just go and find that. The Projector and the Flail, his podcast with Jessa Reed. Go check that out. It is really great, and everything that Mark does, he does with such attention to detail and care. He's got a lot of wisdom to drop and a lot of insight from his particular unique experience of life. Okay, well, I really enjoyed this conversation. I hope you do too. And if you do, like, share, subscribe, comment. Let me know what you think. I'm a little rusty as I'm coming back into this. So I feel like my old habits of trying to like tinker with things and get them perfect tend to prevent me from actually getting anything out. So if there's anything that you notice, just please let me know in the comments. We're embracing, and when I say we, I'm saying me and all the guests and you who are in on this process. This is a get it out, get it done, and don't obsess until it's perfect kind of thing, because obsessing until it's perfect, it never manifests. And it is what it is for now until it gets better. Maybe that's the title of the show. Okay. Let me know. Let me know in the comments. Like, share, subscribe. I love you all. Let's get into this conversation with Mark Pontius. This is an unnamed show right now.
Yeah, do you have any ideas? Any?
I've got about 333 ideas. That's
Oh
But
man.
like as an artist, as a creator, I'm sure like you've probably gone through this before. Like you want that thing to just yeah, there it is. It's just like, yes, that's what it is.
Yeah, naming, I think naming things is like the hardest thing. Like naming a band, you go through like a million different things. None of them sound like quite right until the band has become something. Then like Radiohead, I'm sure in the beginning sounded so ridiculous. Like, what is that name? Once it becomes known, then it's like a thing. And so it's so hard to creatively name something before it has existence in the world and people know it. Uh, yeah, I would sit on that forever. I would
Yeah.
never be able to figure out the name.
If there was a job where I could just kind of stroll into a studio session, like eating like an apple and just like, all right, you guys looking for a band name? Here's a couple. I
Yeah.
I think Jimmy Kimmel might have done this bit, but it was prior to that at Coachella in 2012. My friends and I were going around, and I think Vampire Weekend was playing at that festival at that one. And so we were just going up to random people who, looked like they were kind of tripping out a little bit too. So it'd be like, hey, do you guys know where Frankenstein Sleepover is playing at? And they'd be like, oh yeah, because they didn't want to admit that they didn't know
They didn't
something.
know
So they'd
it.
be like, yeah, I think they're at the Gobi tent. I'll be like, yeah, we just came from there. That was Werewolf's pajama party. But yeah, just
That's so good.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah. But it's got to feel right for you. You can't just have some person tell you what you are. Or maybe you can. I don't know. That's how nicknames have developed for me. People have just bestowed them upon me.
yeah, I had the same thing. I stuck with Mildew Nasty for so long was my pseudonym for like making beats for people that I didn't want my name to be associated with. And it was because a friend said it jokingly once. I think we were kids, we were trying to come up with rap names, and he was like, "All right, you're Mildew Nasty." And something about it, I was like, I love that. Like, and I stuck with it for years.
Yeah. Nice.
Mildew Nasty.
So you rapped?
Yeah, I mean it was all joking. Like the old band I was in when we would have we'd go out and party at night, and we'd come back just to kill time, and everybody was musically inclined enough that we could make, we could program beats and stuff. And there was something about doing it non-seriously for the band that was so fun. And people would be drunk and then they'd start rapping over it. And then we took on like uh names and like parts, and we would just come in and make a beat on the fly, and then everybody would do a verse, and you'd have to just kind of come up with it like in the moment. Some of the dirtiest rapping I've ever experienced, like just vulgar, crazy, just because it was fun to not have like seriousness with it. And oddly, I mean, there were some really cool musical moments when you're not making it seriously. Like there's sometimes you stumble upon cooler things. So it was a thing that we did like jokingly for a long time. I would never I would never rap seriously as an artist, I don't think.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
I like rhythmic vocals and stuff. Like when I do the rare times that I am making music and I sing on it, because I'm a drummer, there is like some rhythmic aspects to it, but I try to stay away from the like white boy rapping. It's just not my thing, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that was, yeah, my friends and I got into that because I'm pretty sure yeah, it was around Chronic 2, I guess it's called. Dr. Dre's
Yeah.
album came out like when I was a freshman in high school. And so that was just big and we got into that. And then like we would all, I don't know, think that we were really cool freestylers and be able to rap and stuff. But there's something really interesting about when you're just doing it for fun. And it's like, what is this delineation between just doing it for fun and doing it seriously,
Yeah.
in a way, because I feel like you said, like there's this like freedom to explore, freedom to fuck up. It's like you're not really being serious. And like interesting creative things can happen, but when we kind of put pressure on something or want it to be a certain way, then you know.
That's what I've learned like in general when I'm making art. There's something where when you tap into that the muse, this like creative well that's universal. It's louder and more clear when you don't have boundaries or expectations and you're in more of a playful state, not taking yourself too seriously. That's when these like really profound ideas kind of come to the forefront. And every time I try to approach making art with some rigid rules, or I want to make a song like this, uh, or here's like the lyric kind of theme, it's not as like fruitful. There's not, by the end of it, I'm not like kind of impressed and wowed with what happened myself. And so when I'm in that playful state, there's like this co-creation that happens with the muse, and it seems to be predicated on showing up with like a playful mentality, just like a kid goes into a sandbox and can kind of imagine a whole world. Uh, that mentality is what makes art for me so fruitful. And there's oftentimes I'll go into like a trance in that state and come out of it and listen back and be like totally confused of how that just happened. Like I don't know how I just created that. Um, that's what I'm like obsessed with that
Yeah.
experience in art now. And I try to like really keep everything else out of the room. So I want to be able to like converse with that muse in whatever way possible.
Yeah.
And if it's
Yeah.
not, if it isn't there, I kind of just leave. I don't really push it too much until I can get into that playful mentality. But it's hard when you do take yourself, if there's like some pressure on delivering a record at a certain time, or there's expectations. You already have you're already an artist, people have listened to you, and you want to make something that fits in that realm. Like you can oftentimes limit yourself without knowing it. And so it's a
Hmm.
challenge, like once you start to actually get some success and people know you, to always be open and be able to pivot into something else if it feels right without
Hmm.
the boundaries.
Yeah, I think we've all had the experience of loving a band or loving a musician, and then they put out something that is deeply meaningful to them and artistic and challenging themselves and pushing the boundaries and being like, oh, this is different. Or
Yeah.
sometimes it takes a while to catch on, or that kind of a thing. But yeah, you brought up the Muse. Are you a Stephen Pressfield fan?
Yeah, somewhat. I haven't, I'm not super well versed, but I know I've, yeah, dabbled in it.
He talks about that a lot, and then you have Rick Rubin, who had his book, The Creative Act. And
Yeah,
so
I'm
there,
obsessed with him. I have that book.
yeah, he's great, right? Like there seems to be, because I guess the way that I've always felt is that, man, I just need like I need to sort of like feel like I want to create something. I don't want to be pressured by like a system, but we kind of can't really get out of the system once you're in the system, right? Like
Yeah.
so yeah, there's this sort of I guess way of thinking where it's like you have to sort of treat it like a job in a way. And yeah, it's very interesting because I when I think of artistic and creative, I think of unbounded and no limits and chaotic and just in a flow state. Yet the world that we live in and the society, the system isn't necessarily conducive to that. So they kind of force you into that rigid structure,
Yeah.
which either you find a way in the rigid structure, or you make an album once every 20 years whenever you feel like the muse comes. Or yeah, well, how do you feel about that?
Yeah, I think the pressure of there's something when you're beginning as an artist, there is that chaos is more fluid, like anything's possible, and you can explore almost like endless possibilities. Once you start to you make something, and especially if it's well received by the culture, you then get pressure on you that they want you to do that again, essentially. And how you go about making the next piece is how much you can cloud that out and not have that be any kind of pressure point or like reference to what you're going to make next, I think dictates how much you can still keep that muse um, in the room and be able to have this relationship with it. Because like there's this thing called audience capture that started to blow my mind once I understood this concept. I feel like my band experienced a bit of it, and all artists do that. When you do get success and you get an audience, there is a um, expectation that the audience puts on you that you can subtly be aware of. But mostly it's very subversive because there's something that you want to please the artist because it's a part of your infrastructure. So if I've gotten success and now I have money and I can get booked at places, if I do something artistically next that they don't like, I'm going to lose a lot of that in theory. Like I'm not going to get the venues, I'm not going to get paid, I'm going to not be able to live the lifestyle that I've been rewarded with now. And so that can be a subtle pressure that when you're going to make the art, you are placating towards what the audience wants you to do. Even if you're kind of aware of it, like if you have a first record and it becomes really popular and that was not something that you were taking seriously and what you want to go do now is something that's like way outside those bounds, you can know that like, okay, well, this is what they want me to make, but I really want to make what I've been, thinking about for a long time, that is going to be very contrastingly different than that first thing. Um, you'll be blocked in certain ways unless you are just courageous and really don't care what anybody thinks about the art, then you can free flow into that. But again, I mean, I think for me, it comes back to this idea where like I had to kind of re-situate when I left my band, being known for like my music, everything that I did musically was known through that vessel of, so I'm associated with this specific band and I sound like this. I was gonna then I wanted to take a break from music and I didn't want to leave it completely. I also didn't want to just jump to like being a solo artist and being like, okay, now here's my thing. I wanted it to feel natural and I took a big break. I had been doing music on my own for a long time, but I hadn't really shared with anybody. And I didn't know if I ever would. It was mostly cathartic for me to do, but as I like sat with it, I was like, I think I do want to put this out. Just there's something that it needs to come to life by letting other people hear it. It's like never going to do anything but just sitting in my computer and I'm the only one that hears it. So, but I had to I had to ask myself, like, why am I doing it? What do I want from this? I had left from like a big successful band because I didn't like the so much attention and the like um, elevating that happens when someone's successful. They like kind of worship you. And I didn't like a lot of that attention. It didn't feed me necessarily. I wanted to do art for art's sake, but I realized how hard, like I was kind of captured by a lot of it. When I was
Hmm.
making music, there was a part of me that was wanting to prove to people that I'm capable or something. And so when I broke it all down, it was just like, what is it that I'm doing? Why am I doing it? I started to realize that there is this aspect of us all as artists, and I think just in general being human, there's a creative aspect of it. And it's essentially what your individuality is bringing to the table. What perspective do you specifically have that when you really think about it, like no one else has, dictated by the specific experiences you've had in your life and how over time that has given you a certain perspective on life. And anything in culture that it's one of a kind for each person. And so being able to let that out as purely as possible, which means not overthinking about what people are going to think about it, because the more unique and individual it is to you, really like the more it's not going to be understood by most people because it's specifically going to be you. It shouldn't fit into any box that people have already heard. It shouldn't sound like any other band. It shouldn't be talking about it in a way that other people talk about it. And so it should be weird and unique and individual to you. And the reason is because you have something to show and share that nobody's seen before. And that's like easy to say and think about, but it's really, really hard to do because it involves being really vulnerable, really honest, and being inspired by other pieces of art, but not trying to mimic it because it worked or it was successful or even you like it. Like you can be inspired by it and let it kind of add to your filter system of what you're going to express, but like really you have to share what you individually have experienced and the way you see it. And if we all were doing that, like to me, that's the unlocking of this utopic, like fractal reality that I think I see as being something that's like a new level of being where we are all collectively sharing our individual perspectives and bringing something to the table that only we can provide. And other people take that in as something that they praise and enjoy, not because they want to be like it, but because they see it's unique and valuable and it's helping them understand the bigger picture. And so that's like I just don't for me, for the most part, I don't really enjoy music that is homogenized or is doing this kind of algorithmic equation of here's how a pop song's written, 30 seconds verse, then we get to the chorus. Then we're going to repeat the chorus, go back to the verse, go to the chorus. It's like this formula that does work on a lot of levels, but I'm really interested and I'm drawn to things that are really soulful and honest and unique. And oftentimes those don't really fit in any kind of formula and they don't sound really much like anything else. They sometimes reference, I think there are only so many people and so many ideas. Certain things are going to, have the same essence as another artist, but underneath it, there's something truly unique and individual. And that's what I'm like trying to hunt after. And it's very difficult. Like it really is hard to stay open and vulnerable and then also like you have to for me I've learned that to access that truly unique individuality I have to show up and be playful and not have much expectation on it. So there's like a bit of an unknown to it as well. Um, at least when you're conversing with the muse, like again, if you come in with too many expectations and too many boundaries, it's not going to kind of play with you and reveal something, a side of you that you didn't even know was there necessarily.
Hmm.
You're going to be in the way of it. And so it's like every time I go to approach anything creatively, there's something about it that when I don't know what's going to happen and I'm kind of out of the way is when it's most exciting. And it keeps me inspired too, because I don't really know where it's going to go. I'm just trying to kind of anchor it down when I can. And when I do that, like at the end of it, when I listen to it, it is very unique and doesn't fit into a lot of boxes. And that used to make me uncomfortable. I would play some of my music for friends and non-musicians and musicians. And specifically the musicians would always, say like, can you play it again? Like, I don't know what's going on. And I don't like, what is this? And it doesn't sound like anything. And I think early on, I was insecure about that because it felt like maybe I was doing something wrong or I didn't, things were out of tune or whatever. It felt like maybe this wasn't good. But the more I did that with certain people and I started to actually get excited that they couldn't put it in any box. And it was oftentimes like breaking rules as far as some things are out of tune, but it's creating a harmonic third element that is very interesting. And so that's like how I approach creativity and art now is like primarily focusing on the goal here is to come up with something that is so honest and unique to me. And past that, like worrying about what somebody else is going to think about it, it just kind of gets you in the mud. And if I focus too much on that, it does dictate when I'm going to create next, if I'm paying too much attention to what people didn't like or did like. And so it's like very protective and trying to kind of always be pulling up another um, rug of my subconscious that I like want to explore and I don't even know what is there. And so it's a real like challenge, but I see that as being the main focus for all artists that I like hope will be like can kind of find that in themselves because like I said it's this fractal unity that I think is what we're trying to move towards consciously and through all this like spiritual seeking and stuff. That's what seems to be the main thing is find the depths of yourself, get to know it, and then show your perspective because somebody else actually needs it. Like they need you have keys to other people that will unlock certain elements of their own understanding of themselves, but you have to do that as like purely you. You can't be mimicking somebody else because then you're losing the thread.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. So much good stuff there, Mark. Yeah, we've touched on some of this stuff before too. And it's just so I love talking about this because yeah, we're talking about, you specifically as a musician, but also this applies to really anything, right? It's like
Yeah.
being yourself and creating from a place where, yeah, someone else really like I had this LSD trip one time. And I remember specifically in the trip, like I had my eyes closed and it was this beautiful like spiral of like these like little colorful kind of almost like Ramin Nazar cartoon characters, like the brightly colored and everybody was just like doing the wave and they're all and they're like, come on, just like do the wave, do your color. Like they were like cheering each other on to like do their specific color and like
Yeah.
when one would flash its color up everyone was like yeah and it was like this ecstatic joy because the reason why I thought of that is just because every like whenever we find something out there where it's like, oh, I feel like this person is just speaking to me. Maybe they created it for themselves, like I just need to create something which entails like you really going through this vulnerable process and this inner work and really knowing yourself and really navigating the territory of discernment between why you're making what you're making and who it's for and what feels good for you. But then, like you said, there's that key delivery and it unlocks in someone else. And they're like, oh, we match. We match. You totally like, wow, I can't create what you can create. But because you're another me creating, I am so happy that you exist. It's like,
Yeah.
and I feel like that is unfolding more and more. Is like with social media, just the democratization of things, like the more things being accessible and people just being like, all right, well, it's not really like those gatekeepers at the top so much anymore. For the most part, they still exist, but it's like, let me just create something and hopefully it resonates with people out there. And if it does, then maybe they get inspired and maybe they create something. And I don't know, that just seems like a pathway to a really good world where people are genuinely creating from this place of being in touch with the muse and being in a flow state and channeling something through. Like you said, like you don't know where it came from. Well, it came from somewhere, right? Like it came through you because you were the one that tuned your instrument to be able to, like your human instrument, to be able to play those notes.
Yeah.
And then it's unlocking. It's like this, like you said, fractal, right? Like this fractal sort of unlocking mechanism.
Yeah, and I think it's really crazy to think about. It's really unknown that when you're creating something from an honest place and you're pouring your emotions, your experience of life into it in that very moment, and you're also open to the muse, to the universe kind of giving you another piece in there, that it's hard to know just how much and exactly how that unlocks something in someone else, to the point where like if you actually knew, you probably wouldn't be able to make the music because it's so profound. But I know for myself, there have been songs that I've stumbled upon on Spotify when I'm dealing with something in my life, whether I'm like emotional or I'm trying to understand a certain part of my psyche, my subconscious, and trauma in my life, or a current thing that I'm going through, that a certain song will come in and it will unlock or it will give so much meaning to something difficult that I'm going through that words can't really describe. I don't know exactly why. Was it the words? Was it the frequencies? Something, though, like gave me profound meaning, and it was like a life raft that like made so many things make sense, or got me through a difficult time to where I could actually move by it and understand the meaning of it. And it was the song that did it. And so and then I'll like do research on the band, and it's like a nobody band in their garage making music, but you can tell that they're doing it authentically and they're not trying, it's not trying to be something else. There's something so unique about it. And those songs, like when I look back, they changed my life so fundamentally. And that artist has no clue. They're just still struggling doing with their thing, but like it did something to me. And if I could talk to the artist directly, I would do my best to try to say, like, thank you for doing whatever you did. And that's what I think is just good to keep in mind when we are like, that's the reason why you should be honest and vulnerable and find your individuality, because the more you do that, it does specifically unlock something in someone else and very well may like save their life or just help them evolve and grow in a way that like you just can't put words to it. That's why music's so amazing. It's such a great modality of expression because so many things are involved in it, with the lyrics, the frequencies. There's a lot of possibilities of healing through that. A lot of the times, I've gotten really into just the frequency stuff with consciousness, how certain frequencies are very healing. They activate certain biology in our systems, and I've like geeked out on that for a long time and wanted to try to make music that was very resonant and had like a specific frequency that was going to unlock someone's third eye or whatever. And I realized that like there's some sense in learning a lot about that. It's first of all to know that that's a possibility is profound. And then there's like
Hmm.
the scientific part of me, very masculine part of me that wants to like figure out the exact frequencies and combine them and then like put the map together. But when I tried to make some music like that and it was hard. I got all these like tuning pieces of gear to get like into a different tuning and like play analog gear all in different octaves and stuff. And it was cool and it was like a good practice. But I then started to discover when I was really in that playful state, and I do like using a lot of like samples and things that are um, sound one way. There's like a certain thing, but then I throw them through a bunch of delays and gear and like warp them to then find different harmonic resonant frequencies within it that then I'll accentuate and make songs from that. And oftentimes they are not in a specific tuning or they're like out of tune. And but there's a feeling to it that's very exciting to me. And the more I chase that, there's times where I've created certain little loops and things that I feel like are doing something to me. And I don't know if it's like what exactly it is, but I basically what I'm trying to say is that there's like something when you're showing up honestly and you don't have boundaries, I think a lot of accidents that can happen that are accidents to you, but the muse kind of knows what it's doing and putting some kind of frequency in there or making sense of what was originally chaos in just enough way that it does create this harmonic trance type of element. And that in itself is like something to that I think we will start to stumble upon some of these like really profound combinations of frequencies that do activate something. And the more we do become aware of like, okay, there are certain hertz of frequencies that are, I know, do this certain thing to the body, I can be aware of that as I'm making music and kind of sift that in. But I still think there's something powerful to approaching it artistically and creatively and that's a more feminine way to kind of approach it than the masculine let me come in with all my tools and note down what frequencies and what numbers and mathematically put it together. There's a space for that, but I'm wanting to make music that's still like emotional and it's like fun to listen to. It's not like a meditative 6 minute kind of thing. I do
Hmm.
think that's really cool, and I want to do some of that. There's a place for that, but I'm really more curious about the artistic, authentic, individual expression of songs that can also include that through accidents is like really where it feels more valid to me.
Hmm.
And yeah, and so I think the way that that unlocks in certain people is like hard to ever to know and to even think about too much. But I know that I've been so moved by some like mundane song and it's become this like epic point in my life that like everything made sense through that
Hmm.
3 minute song for some reason. And it
Yeah.
seems to be because they were just dreadfully honest and were maybe in a place that they were like hurting and they needed to make that. And that's what communicated through it to me was how they showed up and how vulnerable and honest they were is what made it actually work.
Yeah, totally. The things that you can't measure or account for, the intangible, right? Like
Yeah.
the heart, the soul, coming through. Someone's in a place and they are just raw and real and letting it go. And it might not be the most like technically correct,
Right.
perfect, chord progression or whatever it is, but it just hits. It just hits. And I feel like you could feel that in anything that's created, it's like, I mean, even things that are made, right? It's just like,
Yeah.
it's kind of a soulless looking building over there, it's just this slab of concrete, looks like they put it up, no one cared. The architect doesn't get to design in his with his creative muse, and they're like, look, we need this in 2 weeks, just get some prefab and concrete, pour it out. We'll put steel
Yeah.
in it. So there, but because I've really been on this kick of like beauty is what's gonna save the world, if anything. Like beauty, imagination, creativity, unbridled art, because there's life in it. There's there's soul in it. And things that are kind of constructed in a laboratory, it's like, hey, we could get lab grown meat. It's like, okay, well, I don't know. Is that going to be good? Is it not going to be good? Like, do we really know what we're doing here? Is it really going to be the same thing? I don't know. But yeah, there's something to that thing that we can't measure or that we can't quantify, but
Yeah.
it just comes through. It just happens.
It's hard because I think the culture in general, and maybe this is just like a capitalistic thing, but it's you realize like the culture doesn't really encourage that kind of creativity that's radical and just very authentic. There's so many parts of I mean, just the music industry as an example is it encourages homogenization through the avenue of like what makes money and what doesn't, what is good art, what is bad art. And this thing I'm talking about is more of a subjective thing. There is no good or bad version of art. It's whatever's authentic and unique to you is right. It's for someone somewhere. But if you're making art because you want to make it to the top and you want to become a millionaire and you want to be famous, you have to homogenize yourself down in these tried and true tested monetary systems of making art. And there's an art to that too, right? Like there is an art to making your music in a business model. Like there's certain ways that can be tactful and satisfying to creatively approach that. So it's not that it's all bad, like capitalism in itself and making money off of art is not something to pursue, but keeping in mind that that is like kind of creating boundaries on what is accepted and what is not. And that's so subtle. Like the way that we have award systems for art has always been weird to me, that there's like, that's basically programming in the individual that's an artist that like, I'm not valuable unless I get a Grammy and I get, the confirmation from the culture that like, I'm a genius and I'm good because I got this award
Hmm.
when
Hmm.
it's not like there's so many amazing pieces of art that change people's lives that are nobody knows about and was never awarded. And so the culture in general is like constantly acting like it's encouraging innovation, but there's so many hurdles and loopholes you have to get through to actually get it into the culture system. So like getting onto the radio. There's just like so many things. They won't let an artist on the radio unless they can prove that it is going to make money in some way. And that's tested via like doing, calling people and ask people what they're into. It's like it's always this kind of it leads back to homogenization, but it presents itself as like, no, we want to innovate. And then you can see it when an artist actually does succeed and they're new and fresh for the next 3 or 4 years, so many other artists come out and do the same thing and they try to kind of copy it because they see that as like something that they can get success from is if they just mimic that person. And so again, that's a subtle way that we're like homogenizing. We're being encouraged to follow something that already came and worked. And that's essentially what most labels are like subtly doing. They're saying, no, we want your band, you want you to do your thing, but like if it was like, Coldplay or something like that, it would be really good right now because we can make money. And then you find yourself just losing the thread of authenticity over time.
Hmm.
And I think
Hmm.
it's in every field. I'm just speaking about music because I know it
Yeah.
well, but um, it's weird that that's like a habit and an automatic thing that I think we all kind of lead to when we're trying to create anything original and unique and fresh is like you find yourself hitting roadblocks and trying to get it to a mass amount of people and get rewarded for it without it fitting into the vein of what's working. But back to kind of what you said earlier is like the idea, the way that social media has occurred now, and we're all connected to everybody without needing a middleman to get, approval and get our art through the door is profound. And I think that that's what potentially will lead to a place where there's going to be a flip and people are going to realize that like being purely authentic and real, and then putting that into what I say is like your main billboard, which is just your social media thing, whether that's TikTok or Instagram or whatever, and you just put whatever you have up there, then it can connect to those right people and get those keys, and you never have to homogenize and go to a middleman. I think we're still working off of that because most systems still have the corporate overarching like catch-all that like people still go to. But if you're like a musician nowadays and you think that you to get successful, you have to go to a record label, it's like you're going backwards. All the tools are right there. Um, the first thing is find your authentic thing and then put it into social media and you will get connected. And then you can monetize that way. And I think if people start realizing it's like there is no future in formulaic art, that it's all about like what you have to deliver, it's like the most liberating thing. It's like there's nothing in your way actually now. You can make music on a laptop, a very cheap laptop with a shitty mic, and you don't even need a mic. I mean, you can create all kinds of stuff on a computer and then, translate your heart and whatever you individually have to say and immediately get the right people to hear it and see it and then monetize it, whether that's through Patreon, some kind of subscription thing or whatever. I think that's like we're upon a renaissance for artists, I think.
Oh
And
yeah, you think? Yeah.
I think so. I mean, I think that's what the internet is ultimately going to get to. It's still highly controlled, and I think that's unfortunate, the algorithmic like aspect of it, where you create these little bubbles of perspective just by videos you watch, before you know it, you're just like living in a world that has been fed to you because of the algorithm. And I think that's all this like capitalistic model. There's too much money to be made off of that, off of people's perceptions. But the more like decentralized it gets and the more ability that people start to see that there's value in the diversity of art and that each person has gold in them, that if they can just get it out and put it onto the internet, that's gonna it's gonna really activate this like renaissance of artists being able to actually get rewarded for their uniqueness. And
Hmm.
it's things like Spotify that are still, that's the main billboard for music. That's where everybody listens, and they don't reward the artist good enough. But I always tell people that that's not like, if you're gonna make music and you want to make money off of it, Spotify is not going to be your wallet that you're going to get that from. But you do want to put music on there because it's the main billboard that everyone's going to see. Then you diversify and start to get like fans that come to find you, and you can make money in other places. Like Patreon, I think is really great because it's subscription based. You get like, you can see how much money you're going to make a month and you know how to kind of orient. Um, we're doing things like lives and getting people to see a different aspect of your creative process and you can start to get popular enough where you can get booked at places and go play shows. You can get publishing deals to get money in films and stuff, and licensing and things, and that's the main route, as opposed to going to the corporate kind of coats that have always gridlocked this shit. And there's never been a way for an artist in their garage to become well known, to the masses before this kind of internet. So it's a matter of time till the decentralized aspect of it really takes over, and we don't have that corporate arm taking percentages of
Hmm.
everything. That's been
Hmm.
the artist's biggest downfall, is that they can't get rewarded because everyone's got to taken some pennies from it.
Hmm. Hmm.
But yeah,
Yeah.
I see it as a renaissance like coming soon for sure.
That's cool. Yeah. Do you think that like the younger generation who is raised with a lot of this um sort of, democratization and social media and all, like, I can't really think of, outside of Taylor Swift, I can't really think of like who's the big dominating top selling. It seems to have diminished. Like I feel like it keeps kind of diminishing where there's like the one way. Like do you think it's easier now coming up? Do you think that um kids making music or creating art or whatever they're doing, like, do you think it's easier for them to find their uniqueness, to like find their authenticity? Or do you think they are still going to have to kind of go through the process of like trying to be like someone else and getting the feedback? And social media is great, but then the comments, right? Like, you suck, or like, Led Zeppelin did this song 40 years ago, man. Like,
Yeah.
where have you been living? Like, do you think that there's less of the sort of conditioning and priming and sort of indoctrination of like how you should sound and how you should look and what you need to be for kids to, or young artists to like go through so they could find their authenticity quicker?
Yeah, I think so. I think, to be honest, I started to pick up and see this happening already before I mean, as I was discovering it myself, that like, okay, what I want to do is something really authentic and unique, and there's value to that. I was so reluctant to get on TikTok for so long because I just thought it was just like for teeny boppers, like dancing, and it was like kind of all about like, look at me, look how cool I am, kind of thing. And I thought it was just like trash. And I started to finally get on there just as curiosity, and everybody around me was on it. So I was like, all right, let me just like check out what this is. And I was just actually really inspired by the amount of creativity and innovation that people were pursuing, because it felt like this younger generation doesn't, it's not across the board. I still think we have people that like idolize icons and famous people in a way that is like very unhealthy, and kind of creates homogenization and is, you know, blots out any kind of uniqueness. But there are so many young kids that like, because they grew up with their own little billboard to just put their uniqueness out there, and to actually stick out, you have to do something that's like kind of original to yourself. Now, a lot of people would, follow like, let's all do dance videos. So everybody's doing dance videos and they're copying that. But then everybody's putting their little twist on it that is kind of their unique thing. And over time, there's been this thing where you can just see people getting being unique and innovating in a certain way of making a video or a meme, and being really creative with that, and then getting rewarded by getting popular on there, that they see that their uniqueness is the thing that's kind of getting rewarded. And it's almost anything that trends was never planned.
Right.
It was like somebody in the moment being honest, and they captured a moment that was funny, and it connected with a bunch of people because we all understood the metaphor, or we've had a similar experience, but the way they're talking about it is something I've always said in my head. I've never said out loud, and now they're saying it, and it pops and it connects to a bunch of people, and they're all accidents, which means that there's like a unique thing that brought that forth. And it was because you did that in that moment and you said this certain thing. You didn't script it, you didn't plan it out. And when I started to see that, I was like, oh my God, this is, if I had this as a kid, this would have been incredible. It's a place to be so creative, um, and have direct access to people. And I think a lot of the younger kids too don't take the celebrity thing very seriously anymore. I think we as a culture have all started to kind of get to that place, where there's a lot of mocking going on with it. And I think a lot of people that are in those celebrity powerful positions, um, don't, like, they're always kind of speaking out of sync with what is really going on within the culture. And they're kind
Right.
of like mimicking it and doing like a really funky version that kids can sniff out. And they're like, you're trying to relate to me, but like, you obviously don't have the same experiences I have. You're riding a yacht to fucking France right now, and you're telling me about, the struggles of being poor or whatever. And they just don't take it seriously anymore. And so they're starting to lose, the celebrity culture in general is starting to lose its power of like illusion that it had for
Yeah.
so long. And I think
Yeah.
that's another thing that is just, that's creating less people that want to go be a Taylor Swift and be, I mean, Taylor Swift's the worst example because she has like, that's all she has are people that want to be her. But that model is starting to fall away. I think we're seeing a lot of successful artists that are coming from just being really truly authentic from the get-go, and they tend to stay in that because that's what gave them value in the beginning. They didn't chase and mimic somebody and then get rewarded. And now they're
Mhm.
programmed to kind of like find the next thing to mimic, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting, like, the sort of cult of celebrity, the worship aspect of it. It is kind of a really interesting, I would say probably more modern thing in a way.
Yeah, no, totally.
You know, like, I think about like indigenous tribes and things like that, or even when I gather with people in sort of like medicine circles or stuff, is like, oh, you have a song, like share your song. Okay, you have a song. No one is really, the people are competent at playing, and someone could share a good song. But it would be insane if like we lived in like a small tribe and like 150 of us, and like what everybody was just obsessed with the guy who played songs around the fire on
Yeah,
Friday night. It'd be like,
yeah,
because there was more, because everybody sort of also shared their whatever they could do, whether they could sing something or they played a drum or they made a piece of art or something like that. So like the democratization of creativity in general, where I feel like we're coming we're more, yeah, I agree with you, like we're sort of coming more into this age, the individual age, right? Like the age of more authenticity. Like the authenticity just connects. Like don't tell us who to worship, and that's also like a form of control as well too. Is like, okay,
yeah,
pay attention to this massive band that we're going to promote over here.
dude,
Don't
100%.
pay attention to what we're doing over here, and they're just going to play like the teeny bopper songs or whatever. And and but like people, being more in tune with their own creativity in whatever sense it is. Because I just think about these crowds of like 10,000 or 20,000 people just worshiping the passivity of consumption and
Yeah,
the group conformity of consumption sort of like disempowers people, I feel like, in a little bit. You know how many times I've heard people say like, well, I'm not an artist, I mean, I'm not creative, I mean, I'm not a musician. It's like, hey, can you do this? You know?
yeah.
Can you
I get
can
in
you
arguments with people like that all the time. I'm like,
you
you're
do.
creative. You just don't realize it. You're creative every day, you know, in mundane acts that you think are no space for creativity, but you're washing those dishes in a specific way that I can't go do that the same way. Like you're doing it in a certain movement. You're bringing your unique thing to it. It's just we've been programmed to think that that's not art. That's not unique. It's what an artist is somebody that's on, you know, on TV and
Right.
stuff. So
Rich and famous on TV. Yeah, and many times I hear people comparing themselves. Someone will show me a drawing and they're like, "Ah, I'm not really an artist, but I mean, I made this little drawing." And I'm like, "That's great." And they're like, "Yeah, well, it's not really that good. I mean, it's not, it's not Van Gogh or anything." I'm like,
right.
Van Gogh wasn't even Van Gogh when Van Gogh, like, and so yeah, there's something interesting. There's like an interesting thread I kind of want to pull on with like the group conformity, passivity, consumption model of like now moving. I hope that we are moving, and I kind of feel that we're moving in this direction of like, no, it's like authenticity and everybody's involved and it's more collaborative and co-creative.
Yeah, and I think that's you know, we're coming from I'm into human design a lot, and human design talks about this switching of like there's a background frequency that kind of in a way like possesses everybody that's very subtle, but so everybody's individual, but there's this background frequency that's kind of a animalistic urge to do something. And we're coming from one that was it's called the cross of planning, and it's a little more like tribal mentality. Do something that's good for the group. Look out for the group before yourself. And that's was really great for the age that we were in. It was like technological innovation, um, group think that was really helpful to build infrastructure. But it's gotten to the point where now you can see a lot of these, like the idea of doing things for the group and sacrificing your own interests has now become pretty perverted and backwards. And it's like actually kind of dangerous in certain ways. And that's just because we're at the fringe of it us being able to play, have have all the experiences that can be had within that background frequency. And so now we're moving into a new one, which is Across the Sleeping Phoenix, and it's all about individuality, expression, autonomy, and doing something that is purely you and for the act of being you. And that is bringing something to the collective. And the misunderstanding I think a lot of people have about this idea of like being individual and only doing what resonates with you is from the tribal mentality of that thinking, that background frequency. That's called selfishness. That's called you only worrying about you and not worrying about the group. But it isn't that. It's just a little more of an advanced way of coming together collectively. And that's what I say is this fractal utopia is that when you're doing something that you love and is you bring your individual flavor to it, and you do that, you're going to do it really well, and you're going to be bringing something to the collective that somebody else can't do. And when they're doing their thing that they love to do, and they're bringing passion to it and uniqueness to it, that's going to fulfill and give you something that you're not doing because you don't like to do it. And if we're all allowed to do that and we're not doing things out of obligation for the group of people, and that's the good thing to do, then we will, like, everything will be taken care of because there's somebody out there that really loves cleaning toilets and cleaning and being a janitor. And it's
Yeah.
real. I know it sounds
Yeah.
crazy, but there are
Yeah.
people that that's what they love and that's their
Yeah.
act of service and that brings them joy. And if we're all allowed to discover that and we're not being forced to work a 9 to 5 that we hate, that we're doing out of obligation because we did college for that and our parents pressured us to do it. But really, I hate being in that job every day. If we're allowed to, not do that and find, it's going to take a minute for everybody to adjust, but find the thing that you're really passionate about and go do it and realize that there's a place for this on the internet and there's a place I can get rewarded for it. Um, then we will find ourselves in like a really amazing group collective that is everyone's bringing what they have specifically uniquely to the table that somebody else needs and it all feeds itself and it's like what the forest is in nature, like the
Yeah.
bird brings the bird thing to the
Yeah.
forest and the bird's not saying tree be more like a bird, squirrel be more like a bird. The squirrel's doing his thing and then the mushrooms are doing their thing and the ecosystem is like this radical functioning collective that is unstoppable because everything's doing what it does best and
Yeah.
that in turn feeds the other beings there.
Oh
And I
yeah.
think that's the so the sleep cross with sleeping phoenix, that's what we're moving into, and the transition in between that I think is where it was what we're experiencing right now. It's a lot of infrastructure collapse. It's a lot of the celebrity world dying and that the pains of that, the confusion, and so many systems that I think worked for a long time ago are now being torn down to be kind of rebuilt in a new way. And so this is also like why I think it's just very important to start to find your individual thing that you love so much and be vulnerable and honest about it and bring that forth because that is the currency of the new culture is like what are you bringing, what
Yeah.
do you have to offer, not what are you copying, what are you going after because it's something, it's a model you've seen work. It's like, no, what exactly is it that you're bringing that nobody else brings? And that there'll be abundance, there will be connectedness, and you'll have meaning and value, and everyone will. No one will be lacking in that sense.
Man, it's such a beautiful vision of the world. And
I know
I
it's
yeah.
like it makes me so inspired when I start to think about it and talk about it. I'm like, this is just it's what I've always wanted, but like I didn't know I never had containers to see it, and it's now human design helps make that a lot make a lot of sense. But yeah, it's a world that I would love to be in. I would hope we get there.
Yeah, I think we can co-create our way into it. Like I'm sure we've brought this up before in our chats. Like once you make something that's, once you make something that's innovative and ubiquitous enough, where people go, "Oh yeah, of course I'm going to use this thing because why would I use that other? That's just obsolete." It just be like there's just a falling off, like we're not attached to. I was talking to somebody about this today actually. It was like people are going to move towards the thing that is easy and that just makes sense. That's like more convenient. And once it sort of reaches like a critical mass, I mean, I can't wait, because I like my passion is really not doing anything. I don't really, I know, I like to, well, here's the thing. There are things that I love, but I want to have the freedom to do them at my own pace when I feel like it. Right. Oftentimes, so this gets into the radical revolutionary idea of totally restructuring society, right? Like, because that's kind of what's necessary. This is the container that we live in has one dominant financial economic system, one dominant, political system, and we all have to sort of like do what we can do within the zoo that we have here. It's like, all right, I could be the best rhinoceros that I could be, but I'm still in a fucking zoo, Like
Yeah,
I'm
totally.
still not in my natural habitat. I want to sleep for like 8 hours a day. I don't want to perform for tourists that show up and are like, "Oh, the rhinoceros is sleeping," and then they shoot me with some adrenaline or something, and I have to, you know, right? Like, so, so yeah, I think that like my version of utopia is like, yes, like everybody is moving to the pace that they would like to move to. I mean, so many diseases and stresses and uh, all kinds of things can be attributed to the fact that, yeah, you're just like, you're in a machine. You are just like constantly in a machine where you've got to like produce or consume something, right? So,
Yeah.
which which also is an interesting question because, well, the question is, would we have the same level of art have we not, like, if we weren't in this sort of like matrix world where there's this wanting, this yearning to escape, so
Yeah.
somebody punches a hole through the matrix and whoa, mind-blowing art, like holy crap, right? Like it comes from that resistance too. It's interesting, right? It's like,
Yeah. Well, that's like, I love that question because that brings up a pretty existential concept that I think I've realized in a lot of art that I love. And even when I've created art that I'm most proud of in myself, it all comes from like an insane amount of tension and an insane amount of pain and struggle. And I used to kind of be in denial of that when I was younger. I don't know, I noticed watching artists that I loved, they always seemed to be really depressed or coming from a really traumatic background. But yet there's this beautiful piece of work that is like moving me, it's moving people, it's like saving people. And like, wow, the contrast is so interesting. It just seemed to be very common.
yeah,
And then, like I said, as my own like exploration in it, the harder life was for me and the more courage I could have to kind of still show up and create and express, that's when the expression got better. It got really real and it connected and it impressed myself. And then there was something in it that like there is this idea of the two polarities like kind of bumping up against each other, that is what creates creativity. It's what creates the spark, if you will, of life is the two being combined. And so I think a lot of the times, we're in the reality, and especially as we start to consciously expand, there's a desire to get rid of the resistance once and for all. And now you can see, we've woken up and we can see the real truth of reality that like we're all one and love is this centered thing that kind of keeps everybody one. And then we just try to blot out all the negativity and um, maybe not even blot it out, but like we do shadow work and we kind of go through and have new meaning and understanding in our lives of the trauma that we've experienced, but we still all lean towards utopia is no badness. no resistance.
Yeah.
And as an artist, it's like that's always been a paradox for me. It's something that I've like bobbed in and out of that I'm like, yeah, that's what I want too. But when I'm going to make art and everything is all good and dandy in my life, like everything's nice and happy, the art isn't quite as great. It's not quite as transformative and like it doesn't have the contrast. And so I keep trying to understand it more and more in a lot of like the spiritual ideas of life. What does it look like the further up we go in these levels of awareness and experience? Do we ever get to one that is utopic in the idea that there's just no bad guys, you know? And I can't find a way that it works, to be honest, except for when you get back to a source, which is the ultimate version of the one. So both are in there. It's like
Hmm.
that is, but there's an understanding. And so it does seem to be that there are points of collective experience where a number of people do pop through certain illusions and wipe the board clean of the kind of control, the deeply subversive control system that's going on. And that in itself is utopia enough because like everything changes and we kind of reorganize society and there's a new moral compass or there's new meaning that everybody gets behind, but eventually that gets perverted and something kind of folds in again on itself and we have to reorient. But
Yeah.
there's something beautiful about like the idea that we're in this matrix that is a giant control prison, which I believe to be true, but also not in a really weird, paradoxical, complex way. That's a conversation for another time, maybe. But that in itself, like, what if that isn't totally real, but it's a concept and an experience to be had that makes great art and it makes
Yeah.
really evolved souls individualize, autonomize, and pop out of it. And it's like, I mean, the whole thing as an illusion of a VR that we put ourselves into to evolve and test our abilities to create and innovate and get out of the labyrinth makes a lot of
Hmm.
sense.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so at its core, that's something, like I think when we do get to a new society that may be more fractal and not as invasive as the controlling mechanisms are like in our being, that the renaissance and kind of revolution of artists is to actually explore new possibilities within this unified awareness of how we're collectively connected in this very cohesive one way, but also extremely unique and individual at the same time. What kind of paradigms can we explore of creating art that involves that? And so I think it's hard to conceive of that when we're in this kind of more 3D linear time thinking of existence, that once we get into this more fluid, I would imagine it would be more fluid with the fractal kind of connection with people, that a lot of things that are like innate in our psyche start to come more on board. We remember that we're a little more telepathic than we thought, and how can that influence art and expression and all of those things? I think it's hard to kind of really speak about it like technically from this way of knowing what reality is. But I get a sense more and more that that is like the ultimate creative expression place, almost to such an extent that we might create our own realities very quickly and artistically. But you
Hmm.
have to know who you are, know what you want, know how to express to create your own kind of world that's connected with everybody else. But that's your responsibility, is like, who are you? What are you? What do you have to bring to the table? And we grow into another like frequency of consciousness. I think that it's like quick manifestation. It's very real, and it's like creating a virtual world that we're all plugged in. That's like the antithesis of art to me. And but it does come with resistance. There has to be some kind of something that's making it like try to not be that.
Hmm. Hmm.
which that's why I say it's an existential topic because it's like it goes back to the idea of just like being and non-being. Being isn't being without the idea of non-being, but non-being is just like kind of recycling of energy back into a source, if you will. So it exists, but it doesn't, but it's a frequency you can align with. And so like it has to kind of always be there as a polarity to have a, at least what I think is probably like a physical existence. You have to have those two. In a more
Right.
etherical existence, maybe it's a little bit more of a like teamwork thing. It's not good guy, bad guy, but um
Yeah.
yeah, I don't know, a lot to chew on there. That was
Yeah.
a rabbit hole.
Huh. Well, yeah, no, it's great because there is this desire of like, oh, can't it just be easier, in a way,
Yeah,
right? Like, can't I just lay outside all day and just paint and eat fruit and whatever, not have to be anywhere at any certain time or right? Like I think we're always desiring the grass is always greener or, oh, wouldn't it be better if, right?
yeah,
And there also is this real sort of this truth of like the resistance, the challenges that we face, I believe, are challenges that shape our character and that are like these little schools, these little lessons to sort of rise to the occasion of someone said it, I don't know who said it, but someone said like that we get what we can handle, like we get what, like, life deals out what we can handle,
yeah,
even if sometimes we're like, I can't handle this, but there is like this perseverance. Like I was talking to a friend the other day about like the adrenaline rush that kicks in for a mother with like saving her child. Like I remember there was like a news story or something, like a woman lifted a car up over her
yeah.
head to like pick up. It's like no one would have been like, oh yeah, like some woman will probably lift a car up over her head, or something will happen. But the things that we need sort of like kick in online when we need them in a certain way, and then like whatever utopic vision we move to next will come with its own relative challenges. So
Yeah,
instead of singing about like fuck the government, like burn them down, that it'll be like problems will be like, oh, there's no more Zen in the store today, what am I gonna
totally.
do? And then the kava man's out, it's like there's still going to be challenges no matter what, right? I think
Yeah,
it'll all just be relative, and it'll be whatever that generation has then grown up into. It'll be like,
totally.
oh man, like it's gonna take me 3 seconds to teleport to my friends. Like, forget it, and then they'll add the pain out of waiting 3 seconds to teleport somewhere. They'll create a
They'll
song.
create good art from it.
It'll
Yeah, totally.
speak to someone and they'll be like, yeah, man, my teleportation device has been down for 2 weeks. I haven't been able to go anywhere, I've just been
It's
getting
so
things
good.
delivered, right? Like, so
Yeah,
there will be like this relativity to the struggle. But as long as we're in this dimensional plane is all about that in some way, right? Would you agree?
yeah. No, I totally agree. I feel like I experienced that in a weird because there's part of this concept to like actually understand. It's like a little there's aspects of it that become kind of grim to me, that there's like no hope. Because there's like I've had places in life where I have my dream has been to get this thing to release all my struggle and pain. At 16 it was like a car. If I get that car, like I don't have to be stuck in this goddamn house anymore. I can go to my girlfriends, I can get out of here. And that's going to be my happiness. Like that's my utopia.
Hmm.
And then 2 years later, I'm like, my mom's asked me to go to the grocery store to pick up groceries, and I'm like, I don't want to go drive. I don't want to fucking do it.
Yeah, but you would have went right when you
I
got the
would
car. Hey,
totally, I would have done
hey, does
all
anyone need me
everything.
to anyone need me to go get milk from the store? Anything?
Yeah.
What do you need? Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. And so it does become relative. And then, I had it big time when I got like success in my band that it was like, oh, I just need money and the freedom to not have to worry about food on the table and then I'll be happy. And damn well sure, like when I got all the stuff that I wanted, new problems arose that were relative to my newfound kind of comfort. And so it's like you're never comfortable. Like this too now is not enough, you know? And that was alarming for me within the idea of like my dream was to get successful and make music for a job and be a rock and roll star. And I got there and it was great for the first year. Like all those new experiences were utopia. And I felt like on top of the world. And then I was riddled with all of a sudden, like, well, why am I depressed? So why am I still not totally happy? Like I have
Yeah.
all the material happiness, but like there's this other thing inside of me that's this existential, like it's not enough. And I'm glad I had this experience early on. It was tough to realize, but it did get me off of, because when you do get a lot of success, you can just go, oh, well, it's because I'm not in an arena yet. I need to be in the arena. I need to
Right.
get the Grammy. And then when you get those and you're like, oh, well, it's because I'm not like also a famous actor, so I'm going to go into acting. And you constantly like put another thing in the way, but you realize at some point it's like none of it actually makes you happy. So it's just like an endless cycle. And I'm glad that I had that kind of realization and started to not look for external things to make me happy. I started to actually go in and unpack like what was going on consciously. And that led me to a lot of like really great truths that I now hold to be something that does make me really happy. And but I do think, yeah, you're right. It's like it's all relative. Like as we move into another realm, there will be a moment of relief and um somewhat of a like Renaissance revolution, and then new things are going to come forward. And I think the biggest thing is to start looking at it, and I do this with my own life for the most part. When something comes into my reality that is some kind of tension or something that's difficult, instead of jumping into that victim mentality, ah, poor me, the goddamn controllers are getting at it again. They're stopping me from my happiness. I just look at it as a like, oh, this is tension. This is something I can use to to activate my willpower to change and take action and do something to lead myself through it and not avoid it and not become this like unpowerful victim. I don't have any power if I'm in the victim mindset. And so seeing it as that, I think it starts to become this thing where you never get rid of the darkness and the pain. You just know how to deal with it. You know how to approach it. And that's a more balanced state of seeing the value in darkness or pain as being a tension builder that activates creativity, it activates willpower and passion. And that's what you want. You don't want stagnation. And the victim
Hmm.
mentality creates a stagnation of, well, there's nothing I can do. It's they have all the power. And that act in itself is like giving power to it.
Mm.
And so I think it's a hard lesson and it's a difficult thing. It takes like practice. And I've no by no way like perfected it. There's still things that come into my life that I'm just kind of like, yeah, I get so frustrated with, and then I come down in vibration and I play with the victim mentality. But the
Yeah.
more able that I think we are to be able to kind of be objective and open-handed with it when those things come in, look at them as some sort of lesson and some kind of thing that's going to activate us to do something different, is the game kind of all the way up. It just the parameters change and the situations change.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah. It's a beautiful thing to find that happiness inside, like that inner peace, that can
Yeah.
being content and
Content
not,
is the best thing. Yeah.
yeah, and just like you're good and everything else is like, oh, that's nice too. It's just a little cherry on top. And sure, it's also fun to get excited about certain things and stuff, but it's not like you need it to complete you,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
And I look at this too in the world, much of like what the show is about that I'm doing here and exploring is like really how do we change things? Like how do we actually change things in a real way where I don't subscribe. I don't necessarily like this idea of like everything's perfect and everything happens for a reason.
Yeah.
And all I can do is work on myself, and all you can do is work on yourself. And it's like, well, that's not all we could do. I do believe that there is a fun element of the game that requires a little fight, a little participation, a little rebellion, right? Like
Yeah.
something that it's there for a reason. It's this resistance to call us up. In a way, I look at it like, I don't know, probably the most famous example would be like Star Wars. It's like, well, there probably wouldn't be like a Luke Skywalker if there wasn't this empire to fight against, right? It's like
Yeah.
that's what makes the movie interesting. Maybe that's what makes this game interesting is like figuring out how to navigate in a way where you're sort of facing the challenges and not bypassing it by just saying like everything's perfect, I'm just gonna do me. Or I look at like a lot of influencers and people in my communities. A lot of people, like, I'm comfortable critiquing my communities because I'm in them. It's like, hey, we've got like a $26,000 retreat in Bali, and we're just going to be in this other country, and lighting sage and dancing around. It's like, well, okay, cool. I'm glad that that's helping you in some way, but you're totally like bubbling yourself off from like also injecting whatever you are learning into the world. And some people could make the case that it ripples down, but that's
Right.
just the same thing as like trickle down economics. It's like trickle
Totally.
trickle down healing, or something. Um, so yeah, and it reminds me too of this test that they did, this study with, I think it was plants, where it was like three plants, and one of them, maybe you're familiar with this, is like one of them they like shared love, they said I love you. The other one they like yelled at and they were like you're a no good dirty plant. And then the third plant they just neglected. And the one that did the worst was the one that was neglected. So I'm kind of like connecting that in a way of like being passive or checking out
Yeah.
or doing nothing and being a victim and just being like, well, I mean, I've been there. I've certainly been there. I've been there where I'm like, well, it's all fucked. We're all fucked. I don't know. There's certainly nothing I could do. We're going to like, Archons are going to chew up this planet and spit it out. We're done. Um, so yeah, there's some stuff there for you there.
Yeah. No, there's a lot there. I think that's something that I definitely was in the passive mentality for a long time, which I think is kind of a requirement to start to do the inner work and like figure things out. I just didn't get activated by all that much at all. Like bad things, I kind of just go with it. Good things, didn't really celebrate. It was what it was. And there's a lot of spiritual, theories of being really Zen, that's the thing to do, and a lot of the Buddhist mentality of getting out of the Maya, which is just like no desire, and so it's like this passive mentality is what we're seeking. And it resonated for a lot of like moments that I was in, and it helped certain things. But yeah, at a certain point, I started to realize that the idea of being like a rebel in the system, knowing the pitfalls of the system. And so like I'm constantly seeking more and more knowledge about how this control mechanism works, because not to be in more victim and grim mentality, like, oh my God, there really is just no way out, but to get access to the parts that are in our psyche and in our kind of habits of seeking love and not experiencing pain, like how some of those are actually parts of the control mechanism. And I think that's a big part of this, like the spiritual new age movement. A lot of it is this like passivity and like taking a lot of drugs and seeing the oneness of the universe and then just kind of like checking out. And that isn't going to get us anywhere. That's one way that the controllers of this system wants you to be. And there's bliss in that. There's like some peace and love in it to be experienced. But um, I think after doing it long enough, for me being in that passive state, I did get a new fire of like, oh, I want to be a rebel, and I want to like my actions, I want to be a sense I want it to have a sense of like rebellion that is something that I believe in and it's true, but is going against that control system. And so the more that knowledge we get of that control system, then you can see the ways that are most powerful to act and be in the world that are in contrast to that. And that's in itself like a rebellion. And I think that's the thing back to individuality. It's like the way to rebel is to be endlessly open to change and creativity and individual expression because that's against the control system. The control system's about stagnation, homogenization, control, fall in line, and be like everyone else. And so the more you can discover yourself and then don't just be passive with it, is then be in the world and do something. And
Yeah.
also, I started to realize the sensitivity of like being out on the rooftops saying, "Awaken, everybody! Like this is the truth. They're controlling you," is just sticking out and having the system get more and more around you and to try to like bat you out. So it's being a rebel in the system is staying not preaching your truth necessarily in a way that's like this evangelical, like this is what we all need to do to get there. It's being it and like
Mm.
finding your individual thing and then just being it as the act of communication to like, here's a way to
Hmm.
be yourself like this, and not like glorifying any other person that's better at doing it. It's just that's the act of rebellion is like seeing the tricks of the system and not calling them out to everybody because that gets too much attention on you and things get difficult that way. But it's like a silent Jedi rebel in the system that's hacking a way out via unique individual expression and a courage to do that against all odds. And like always being as creative and open to change as possible. Because again, those are mechanisms that is like it's expansive and that's the way out of corrupt systems, not focusing too much on the bad guys and trying to dethrone them. It's too big for that. We have to like make it a part of our lives and our act of being that they can't that can't program you, can't control you if you're doing that. So it just becomes null and void. It doesn't work. Like
Right.
you cannot be controlled if you are autonomous and full of love and like expression, but not so much in that you just, without thinking, love everything because then you get manipulated and you let people manipulate you. So there is an act of like as a rebel, as like Luke will kill a motherfucker if he needs to, right?
Yeah.
But not in the act of like pure hatred. It's a this is what's right. And I'm not saying it's like we need to go kill people, but I'm just saying the contrast of like it's not all love and
Yeah. Yeah.
standing for the truth of one's own being
Yeah.
and being kind of willing to die for that, not in a martyr way, but like that's the kind of passion and willpower behind it.
Yeah.
And calling people out for what they are if they're close to you and you have to set boundaries, that can sometimes feel very bad and manipulative or feel like you're doing something wrong, but not if it's something that you believe in and you're standing for something that is of truth and creativity and expression, then it's what kind of needs to be done. And so the love and lighters part of the new age is very passive and kind of dangerous, I think, because it's not all that. There's a
Right.
lot more that's not out there for our good and love and light. There's a lot of stuff that we need to like stand our ground and be true to who we are is like the act of rebellion.
Yeah. Hell yeah. Yeah. Silent Jedi disco. That's what you got to
Yeah.
do. Yeah, you're dancing to your own beat and yeah, and within the system amongst everyone and then doing your own thing. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's really cool. It's interesting because I see, right now is like I guess a particularly interesting point because it's like federal presidential election year. So people even in the spiritual communities and the psychedelic community and people kind of come out of the woodwork and they're like, well, we got to stop this guy and we got to stop that one. I kind of like I wanted to just get even crazier because then, like, say what you will about Trump, he really activated a lot of people in thinking in alternative ways. And we could say that, yeah, some of the stuff might not be factually correct or whatever, but at least they're thinking outside the box. At
Yeah.
least it's actually incredible. A lot of people who would identify as being conservative and Republican are starting to talk to you about, things that were um that they normally wouldn't talk about or they normally wouldn't pay attention to. But, like I was talking to a guy the other day who probably fits this category. He's like, yeah, man, you just got to watch out, the seed oils and, different things like that and the foods. And I'm like, yeah, yeah, see, like we're on the same page, right? And it's like, then they always have those like statistics where it's like, well, we got to get more people out to vote because voting has been down. More people didn't vote than did. I'm like, well, that sounds like a vote to me. Sounds like a vote that we don't
Totally.
want this thing. Like both like so I'm for it getting as weird and strange and crazy and far out and activating people to just shoot out into any outside the box ways that they're going to think. Who cares how wrong they are or whatever? Just get them thinking outside of
Yeah.
the homogenous one world way that people are still going to fall into that as well too, but the more and more people start thinking in different ways, then I think that we start to realize, like, wait a second, this is ridiculous. You're telling me that we're like a free country and we get to choose between two like basically insane old people? Like,
Yeah, I know.
so that will see it, like I like that as a demarcation point of change in terms of mass consciousness. I think that's
Yeah.
a pretty cool beginning of change
I
where,
think
we're
that's what it
yeah.
has to come with that chaos, like you're saying. It's like I'm the same way. I'm kind of like, let's get weirder, let's get more, let's break the bounds. I think that is like it's necessary for the infrastructure of perception and how we think the world is. Like a lot of those things have to spin into chaos so enough people can see the ridiculousness of it.
Yeah,
And I
right.
feel like sometimes when you're looking at the politics and things, it's like they know they're trying to be so crazy. It's like, how are people still taking this as reality? Like it's so absurd. It's like they're doing it to try to wake people up almost. There's like an element that I'm
Yeah.
like, these motherfuckers know what they're doing, because
Yeah.
it's so crazy. But I think that's almost like we have been so sheltered into this one way of thinking and controlled and programmed that way. To get people out of that, the reality has to get crazy and weird, and we have to figure out how to make sense of it. And that's like a necessary change that has to occur. And I do think that's what we are right in the middle of. And that's what the human design stuff says. It's like they put the marcation on like the time on like 2027, 2030 as a like that's when the background frequency fully changes. But obviously before that, there's a wave that you feel as it coming. And so a lot of people have, that's why there's been a mass awakening for the last 5, 6 years, is people feel that coming. And
Yeah.
everybody's changing in their own ways. But now we have to watch the mass collective elements start to really fall apart and not look at that as like, oh, it's apocalyptic, the world's ending. It's actually like, no, just wait, just like, again, kind of, find yourself in the chaos and find what you want to do. As all the pieces fall, it will like rebuild back together without that kind of parasitic kind of control mechanism being able to do anything because nobody takes it seriously anymore. And everybody has discernment to not want to do that again. We now see how programmed and how dark it all was. But that is painful to do if you're not like keyed into it. It's like people are going
Sure.
to experience the world falling apart and having this revelation that there were people in authority positions that like said that they had our best interest in mind, and damn did they not, and here's all the dark things they did. That's a difficult pill to swallow if you haven't been open to it already. And so it is going to be messy, and like it is going to be kind of hard to observe. But yeah, to me it's like it's so necessary for the
Yeah.
chaos to ensue.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And the boomer generation will be gone pretty much, right?
Yeah,
Like, so that whole, they sort of were that like dominating energy force that has been guiding at least the West, or we could say the world, like for the last, 50, 60 years or whatever. So yeah, once the sort of dust settles on that too, it's like, oh yeah, that's right. We're in sort of a new way now. And yeah, there's a lot of people that, I sometimes think about it and I'm like, wow, how does anyone actually think that the government has our best interests? Like, how does it, like, it's hard for me because I've never felt that way. So it's hard for me to like get into that mindset. And I'm like, oh, it's probably just because they're really afraid to like let go because they don't know who they would be or what the world would be. Or it could be really scary to let go of like a sense of general consensus normalcy.
yeah,
I mean, you do hear a lot of people say, "Well, things are just so crazy, they're too crazy." And yeah, I'm like, well, as McKenna said, he's like, as time speeds up, things will get weirder and crazier and stranger and
yeah,
like exponentially. And at some point, it's going to be so much so that it's just like the it bursts and we're entering into new realms, and hopefully that's when at the same time there's a convergence of unique, creative, authentic artists that can speak to that moment
yeah.
and
I think that's
commu
what's going to help build that new world is like, as
yeah.
Terrence said, that artists build culture. Like they're on the forefronts of being able to innovate and like sense ideas, that's going to be the, like I said before, it's the currency moving in is like the individual freedom and ability to express and create in your own unique way. Like a mass amount of innovation can happen very quickly, and that if people are allowed to do that and it's encouraged. Um, and you see, it's like there through the chaos, like the one thing that the controllers or whatever the they is like trying to do so with so much energy that it's almost comical is to stop that at all costs, stop anybody thinking outside the box in a way that is like so obviously just very it's encroaching on people's like normal freedoms of just this like fact checking thing. Like we need to stop the disinformation from being out there. And it's like what is the disinformation? Who's the authority on this information? It's
Yeah,
just artists, people like thinking and coming up with concepts that, yes, some of them are crazy conspiracy theories, but a lot of them are like interesting and they are outside the box. And there's maybe a sliver of truth in that one and a sliver of truth in this one. And if we let everybody kind of just do their own thinking on it, we will get somewhere. But the amount of like, that's why the internet is so like hyper controlled and the cancel culture idea of like basically punishing anybody that steps out of line, that with the medical stuff as well. Like they're doing everything they can to stop that, but the background frequency is just encouraging it more and more, and there's nothing they can do about that. And yeah, it eventually will get more crazy, and then we'll land in a space where it's like innovation is the main thing, and there will be no boundaries on that. The way that Silicon Valley or anything right now is just kind of co-opted by any parts of the tech industry is like co-opted by control and getting clearance to do this and that. You have to go through these hurdles to get it into market. Is like that's all been the thing that has like limited innovation in a certain way. And but we're
yeah,
seeing it more and more bubble up like random people in their garage, getting some schematics online and getting a new understanding of how to create a free energy device and
yeah,
go do it with like,
right. And then three
tools
days
from the
later
hardware side.
they commit suicide.
Disappear. Yeah, totally. And that's
Yep.
the other element. So but it's like we're seeing it more and more frequently that eventually we're going to get to a place, I think, where that they can't do anything to stop it. But they
Right,
might,
right.
take some steps here soon that are like, stopping the internet or stopping whatever kind of freedom of information. But I don't think it will. There's no way it'll work with that background frequency coming. So you
Yeah.
can't stop it.
Yeah, and the empire is going to do what the empire does.
Yeah.
That's like they're playing their part. right? So I think it's more about, if this podcast was to have a message, is like play your part. Play your authentic part in everything, whatever that is. If it's just to tend to your garden, do that.
Yeah.
Whatever. But yeah, it's like that it is interesting to think about. In the short term, you're like, oh my God, like, yeah, someone inventing a free energy device and then getting suicided, like that sucks. Like that's terrible. And in the grand scheme of things, it's like that's sort of the way it goes for now. Is like that's that big resistance and keep doing it or keep trying, right? I think that yeah, you any sort of like despair that I've had in the past has been a little bit quelled by the fact that yeah, you can't really stop the human soul from expressing itself.
Yeah. And it's like that. I mean, I always think too, it's just the universe is so much more complicated and nuanced than we're like led to believe in this reality that who's to say that person that created that free energy device and then they got offed isn't going to be back in 10 years in a body going, oh, I'm back. I'm going to get you now. It's like that. It's ridiculous to try to control this thing in that way. But it is being smart that like reading the room, it's maybe not the right time if you do stumble upon some kind of innovation like that to go the route of mainstream and go get the copyrights on it and get it like that's not what should be done right now because
Right,
it's
right.
just you got to read the room. But it's not to say it's bad or there's no way. It is kind of a waiting game. I feel like for certain things that that's the sense I get that like these next 5 years, we're gonna have to still see all this kind of chaos ensue and things get torn down. And then there will be a right time where it's a lot more free to kind of move about the cabin and express. But I do see a lot of value in like knowing when to kind of keep our mouths shut with certain concepts and certain things. You just drawing too much attention right now is somewhat, it's not necessarily dangerous, but it's just not smart to be able to like again, you want to be that like silent Jedi that can walk into a room and play the parts of like, yeah, I'm just a civilian, homogenized and following everybody, but you know the tricks that are being played and you know how to not really take it seriously and not be controlled and manipulated. Like that's kind of the game right now, which
Hmm.
is hard when you do first awaken and have a spiritual experience, you do go like, oh, well, everybody just needs to know this thing and then it'll all be good.
Yeah,
So I need to go
right.
get a podcast. I need to go on the news and tell everybody.
Yeah.
And then you realize it's like this isn't the way it goes. It's far more radical than that. But
Yeah.
I love
Yeah.
all those concepts. So it's like I don't like secrets necessarily and keeping information from people, but I see a value in it. Right now and just being smart with how you kind of show up in the reality. Because it's like the way AI is, the way technology is like, yeah, we're kind of being watched and viewed by whoever the they is, if that's extraterrestrials or some kind of hyperdimensional way to view it. It's not even necessarily the AI, but that's all the more reason to like know who you are, have control of your thoughts, because that's the mechanism that it comes through, you know?
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Getting yourself in order, getting yourself in tune, and then, sharing that in the little ways that you can,
Yeah,
right? Like I oftentimes think about like, well, yeah, if like the grid goes down, it's like how many people are going to be okay with like the people that they have in their community or their network or be able to get food or drive somewhere or whatever it is, right? And I think
yeah,
I mean that's obviously when you see the push for like everything connected, it's always like, oh, bring more people together and it's green and it's clean and it's good and it's like, yeah, and it's also under like one company or like one entity,
totally.
right? And they could just be like, all right, that's it. So yeah, yeah, power to the people, we're bringing it
Love it.
back. Yeah. Well, Mark, this has been awesome. Thanks for being on the show.
Yeah, man, I love this. This is a really good conversation. We'll have to do it again.
Yeah, we touched on a lot of things. There's I and yeah, we're probably gonna do it several times because you're a man of many interests. So we
Yeah,
can
no, I would love to. We have all kinds of crazy shit we can get into.
yeah.
When are you dropping all these? When are you gonna be releasing them?
It'll probably be sometime next week, late next week, I think.
You know, get a
Yeah.
name before then. Just go with it.
Yes, definitely. It's gonna come. I've got a couple top contenders. We'll see.
Nice.
Let me see if there's anything worthy here in sharing right now.
You gotta just throw them all in a bucket and just let fate decide for you.
Yeah. Well, the thing is that it just like I have a problem when it comes to the name because, well, I don't want it to sound I would do want it to sound unique, right? And anything that I've sort of come up with, it's I look at it, I question it, I go, it sounds a little pretentious or
Yeah,
forced or something like that. But I feel confident I'm surrendering to the process. So I'm going to record a couple more episodes, and then by that time, there's going to be a name, and it'll be out, and that's what it'll be.
nice. I love it.
Yeah,
Cool. Well, also just wanted to share quick because I'm doing these like a new thing for me, the sessions. Well, you know about it,
yeah,
but
yeah,
just to put that out there, if people want to do, I'm basically doing like creative consulting sessions. That's kind of all about this individuality stuff, finding your true voice, how to go about that, exploring all that is within that, and then a little bit of human design stuff. I'm a projector in human design, and so I have a thing where you can book a session just like projector to projector. If you are a projector as well, I can just share a lot of the like tips and tricks that I've figured out. You don't have to be a projector. I know a good amount about other design profiles, but that's where I thrive most. Yeah, so you can book those sessions on my Instagram. There's like a link tree in there, and that's where you can book them. Um, and yeah, just wanted to throw that out there because it's something that's a new adventure that I've started, which I have been enjoying a lot. It's very much a part of the projector profile is like helping people through conversation and finding out elements about themselves. So it's been really fun to explore.
yeah. Please go check that out. I mean, that's kind of how we got reconnected. I heard you, and I heard you
Oh
talking
yeah.
about that. I was like, what? I was like, Mark's doing creative coaching, and is that how you label it? Is it like a coaching or
Yeah, it's like creative consulting, really,
creative
because it
consulting?
can,
Yeah.
yeah, and it's just like a one call. It's like an hour call, but we can do many if we need to. Whatever, it kind of is just like I'm open to whatever anybody needs, but we can get into a lot within an hour that can be like
Oh yeah.
specific.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. You're great at it. So yeah, yeah, that's awesome. I wish you the best of luck in that, and please reach out if that resonates with you. Yeah, that's what a gift to be able to talk to someone with like your specific skill set and perceptions on things and know-how. I mean, it's yeah, and then the fact that you just like love helping people, I mean, makes it all the much better.
Yeah. And I didn't say my Instagram. I'm so bad at this kind of fucking plugging shit, but that you can find it on my Instagram and you just have to figure out my Instagram. It's Suitnop, which is like my music artist name. It's my last name backwards. And but it's a five instead of an S. So it's Uitnop is the Instagram profile. And then I do make music that's under that same name on Spotify as well.
Cool. Yeah, I'll put links in the show notes. And I still have to think of that person that I was talking to the other day, and they were like, I'm a projector, and they were struggling. I was
Oh
like,
yeah.
I got to refer him to you. Yeah. Yeah. Mark's great, as you could tell, as you've been here with us through this whole conversation. So, yeah, thanks again, Mark. Appreciate it. And yeah, thank you to everybody. Subscribe, smash it, touch it, tickle it, whatever you got to do. Just do it. Love you all. Thank you.
Awesome. See ya.
Bye. Hey everyone, hope you enjoyed that conversation with the wonderful Mark Pontius. If you did, please like, share, subscribe, comment, tell people about it, tell entities about it, tell interdimensional demons about it, tell angels, biblically accurate ones, whoever. Just tell people about it. Do the thing that you do when you like stuff, share it, etc. But please subscribe. Subscribing helps a lot. And don't forget, one of the goals of this podcast is to get a discussion group going so that we can discuss these things further with each other on Zoom calls, probably monthly. I'm really excited about that. If you're excited about that too, let me know in the comments. Reach out to me, DM me on Instagram, find me, message me. And thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. Till next time. Peace.